Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They offer a wide selection of high-quality plants, landscaping materials, and home decor. They do amazing high-quality work and can help you transform your indoor and outdoor living spaces into something beautiful. So stop by Casey's Outdoor Solutions today and let them know you appreciate their support for Rock Solid Radio. Visit Casey's today at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
Welcome to another episode of Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson here in the studio with the one and only Merrill Hutchinson. Hey, hun.
Hey, what?
Are you loving the snow?
You know what? In our last show, you were complaining about cold weather, and you put out an invite.
I did.
What was your invite? You want to say?
I asked if there was anyone out there that wanted to invite us and have us come stay with them.
Yeah.
Somewhere warm and
sunny.
sunny.
And what happened?
And I was literally writing for the show, and we got nothing. And then all of a sudden, you got an invitation.
One of us got something.
Now wait a second. We both got an invitation, but I'm gonna give it to you.
We have a son who lives in Hawaii, and he is actually moving back to the States, and he's got a lot to do, and he's over there by himself now. And he said, "Hey, Pops, you want to come help me move?"
No, wait a second.
Guess where I'm going,
no,
baby.
Wait a second. I think he said, "Mom and Dad, you can take turns."
So I'm going to do the first 3 weeks, and then he'll be back over. No,
I'm
only going to do a couple days.
Whoa! And he's staying on the beach.
It might be at Waikiki.
That is so bad, so bad. So I'm just going to keep putting that out there. I'm waiting for my turn. So maybe.
Well, he's moving to Virginia, so maybe you'll get an invite
not the
there.
Same. So
what are we talking about today? What's going on?
But if we checked out last week's show, we did talk about absolute truth. And please go back and listen to that show.
That show is getting hit, hun.
Ooh.
It's getting hit. It's good because, hun, it's a great show and topic because of, like we talked about in the show, the amount of confusion that we are finding in our marriages and our family. And as we always say, where the family goes our society. And if you want to see why there are societal problems, just go back to the family, and it's the amount of confusion of who's leading the home, what rules and guidelines is the home going to be run by. It's all these things that are really just kind of lost because everybody has to be right.
So I got a good cup for you today.
Oh, that's nice.
It reminds me, if you're listening and not watching, I got my cup that says "Don't give up the ship," and I
gave up more than the ship. Let me tell you.
It reminded me of the story you told last week of you getting seasick out on Lake Erie.
Why do you laugh when you say that?
Oh my gosh, because hun, as you told that story last week, I literally physically found myself feeling nauseous.
Oh, yeah.
And that story is so old, but man, I tell you, that's the thing we're talking about today.
That's called
honestly.
Empathy, right? When you can feel my pain.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was empathy. But that story is over 30 years old. This is before we were married, and that story still makes me laugh and makes me have sick thinking about it. So, we're talking about stories today, actually, and, I hope that you realize that that's the way Jesus taught the disciples in the very first century was through stories. And that's how he still teaches us today. And so we're really going to kind of tackle that whole topic with some really good stories. So everyone likes a good story, right? I'm sure you guys do, and we do too. When I was dating you, I loved being at your house and everyone was around the table and you guys would just push the dishes back and for hours you guys would just tell stories.
So that's funny because whenever we get together and people say, hey, how was your Christmas or whatever, I always say, well, we're together with family and everything and just telling a bunch of lies and having fun. And the reason I say that, because the stories get bigger. Like, if you made somebody laugh last year with the story, you can't tell the exact same story. You have to kind of embellish just a little bit more. Yeah. And so So now those stories are actually just kind of lies,
Well,
and I'm being funny there, but there's a nugget of truth, but the stories have to get bigger to keep
well, and
the
here's
attention.
the cool thing is that we have a whole new generation of ears now who are listening to these stories for the very first time, including our 3 youngest who are adopted, so that they hadn't heard the stories maybe that our older 2 had. And so they just keep going on. They have a life of their own,
Yeah,
and so it is kind of funny. But I've been married. We've been together for 36 plus years. And so I've heard those stories a few times.
Yeah, but see, I keep making them better and better,
Okay, so we're going to get into some stories today because everyone likes a good story. But before we do that, we really need to pay some bills. So we want to thank our sponsors.
Yeah, so let's thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction Company for coming alongside of Rock Solid Radio. We couldn't do what we're doing without their support. So we want to thank those guys. Both of those companies are just fantastic to our local community. I'm sure if you're listening from afar, you can think of companies in your local area that are major contributors to making your community a better community. And so that's the way these guys are here in our area. And we happen to benefit from that.
Yeah.
So we want to thank those guys.
We also don't know how you're listening to us or watching us, maybe on YouTube or maybe listening by one of our major podcast platforms, whether it be Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, or Google Podcasts. But we thank you for listening, and we hope that after 2 years plus, of a library on shows of faith and family and fitness, which, by the way, you can find all of them at rocksolidfamilies.org too. We hope that you'll share them. We hope that you will just really listen and keep listening. And maybe for some who are familiar with Rock Solid Radio, they don't know we do another weekly podcast called Strong Dads. Tell them about that.
So the Strong Dads podcast is hosted by Kyle Crawford and myself. And
much younger dad. He is. I'm just saying. A different perspective.
I have so far to go with him.
You guys are cruel.
Oh, that's part of it. Wait till you see this week's show.
Oh,
that's going to be fun.
Oh, you've been bad. You two banter back and forth like son and father.
That's good. But so that show is part of us just talking to men and having a lot of fun, but also then boiling it down to the challenge of what us as men have in our homes today, especially in the culture that we're in, and digging back to that absolute truth that we were talking about, Hun, at the beginning of the show. So that's just such a big conversation that us men, in large part, have just we've taken our feet out of the ground and we've just drifted. And it's time for us to get back and say, hey, wait, this isn't good. We have to find some direction.
Hey, don't give up the ship.
Don't give up the ship.
So whether you're listening online or whether you're watching us on YouTube, please share our shows. Give us a 5-star rating, because we are finding out that's how we move up on the search engines, is the more 5-star ratings we get, the better.
So another thing with that too is, especially because we are new on YouTube, we need you to subscribe to the channel. So if you watch the show one time, and unless it offends you or you just simply don't like it, please subscribe to that. So it's subscriptions and 5-star ratings that actually boost that and help us get the word out. And like I said, it's that's how we work in that particular media platform in order to help it get out.
So YouTube, you can go to and search Rock Solid Radio and find all of our shows that we're doing today. And then Strong Dads is the other one to search. Yeah. And then we have Rock Solid Families. It's another channel as well. But Hun, come on, it's story time. Tell us a story. Now, again, this isn't just a story to tell a story, but a story that maybe you learned a lesson from.
Where do I begin? So I can think of so many lessons, like even just growing up. And I didn't tell you about this one, but this was one. This is so funny, and especially I was reminded of it.
You're telling me a story I've never heard
before?
No,
you've heard it, but I didn't tell you that I was going to say anything about it today. And I was reminded of it today because right now, as we record this, it's very cold outside, and
that's why you want to go to Hawaii.
It's like an old traditional winter around here. And so, where I grew up, we had a big lake, a big pond, and my dad was always adventurous and doing different things, and he had the idea that across this lake we were going to build a bridge. And so, for 3 winters straight, every time it would ice up, we would go out with chainsaws, hammers, sledges, ladders, everything, and we would build that bridge out across that lake.
On the lake in the winter?
Yeah, we wait for winter. It would freeze over. We'd go out there with all of our tools. We'd take chainsaws and we would cut big, holes in the ice. We would take railroad ties and cut points on them, make them look like a pencil, so to speak. And then we'd get ladders and stuff, and we had big tamping bars. And the bottom of a pond is very soft mud.
Okay.
And so we would take, be my two other brothers, myself, and my dad. And we would take these big railroad ties and then direct them straight down, and we would just pound those things down, okay? And so we would get maybe 20, 30 feet of bridge done each winter. Was just kind of how it was working out. And after we got about halfway done with that bridge one year, okay, well, all of a sudden the winter starts to warm up, and when that warms up, the ice starts to melt around the perimeter of the pond. And one day we came home from school, and we got off the bus, and we looked at our pond that we had spent all winter working on this bridge. And it was a little bit windy that day, and that big sheet of ice, the wind was blowing it, and had our bridge like this.
No.
It was completely laid down. We were like, oh my gosh. And so
your poor dad.
We got home, we got our tractors, we got our trucks, we climbed out there on the bridge, even though it was pretty shady, and hooked ropes and stuff to it, and we started to just put tension on it to upright it, all right? And then once summer came, guess what we got to do? We had posts that we had to cedar posts that we had to cut angles on and everything, and we learned why it's important to put angle supports on your vertical post. And so diving down in the water, planting those down, down. So, but that whole story of what happens when you don't make your bridge stable, and we had so much fun with that. That bridge is still standing.
It's still standing after 40 years?
Probably 40 years. That bridge is still standing.
Yeah,
so
it was very cool too.
Yeah. So anyway, but Utah, every winter, that's what we'd skate for a while, and then Dad would come out, and boom.
Your dad,
we would start building bridges.
He is a man of ingenuity, that's for sure. So, well, my story's a little older actually, and it goes with my best friend, who I'm going to send this to her because I don't know if she'll remember the story. We were like in 4th grade.
She'll see how you tweaked it.
It probably has a life of its own, but her name is Nika, and we were out riding bikes on a spring day, and she and I decided to switch bikes. And so I had her bike, she had my bike, and we were going down this street. It was a little bit of a hill, and you, I know, have made fun of me because it's not really a gigantic hill.
It's not much of a hill. We call it a grade.
It was just kind of a downhill grade. But this downhill grade T-boned into my grandma's house. Her street, she was, at the end of that T-bone, and it was on a different street. But anyway, so we were heading to my grandma's house, and so we were going down that grade, whatever you want to call it, when my friend kind of yelled over, "Hey, my brakes don't work," is what I heard. Now, she says later that she says they don't work well. I didn't hear the word well. I just heard they don't work. And here I am heading downhill, and I'm in a little bit of a panic because at the bottom of this hill, it's spring, and so there's a lot of sand where they had sanded the roads during icy roads. And so I'm a little fearful of some road rash if I would try to turn or stop, which I couldn't because the brakes didn't work, right? So I'm flying down this hill, and I'm starting to panic, and I'm actually starting to cry. And I don't realize it that if I would have tried, the brakes probably would have worked, just not very well.
I think the evidence indicated that the brakes actually worked fine. That's kind of the part of the backstory that
my dad tells later.
But because you thought they didn't work,
I didn't try them.
You didn't even try
I didn't even try them, right? So I ended up going straight forward into my grandmother's house, a stone brick house. I literally hit that. I went into the bushes, and I literally got knocked unconscious. And by the way, I blacked out before I even hit the wall.
You don't remember hitting the wall? I don't
remember hitting the wall or anything. And so all I remember is waking up in the hospital, and my friend is nowhere to be found, and my mom is there. and I find out that my friend got scared, Nika, and she ran home, and she kind of didn't know what to do.
She was going to be in trouble.
I guess. And the mailman found me. Like the mailman who walks house to house found me in the bush.
Yeah.
And knew that was my grandma's house and got word. Again, this is the day before cell phones. And so they got word to my mom and stuff, and I ended up in a hospital with a concussion. But
I'm not laughing.
yeah, you know what? You guys do all the time.
I've heard that story so many times, and we have actually made that story. Linda was flying down a mountain, no brakes. And so we actually played the story up quite a bit.
Well, and that is honestly why I have this intense fear of going downhill fast. I don't like to ski. I don't like to bike ride. You have, going down a ski slope. But anyway, but my lesson in that was to always test and verify. That I found out later, that's not what she said. She said the brakes don't work well. And my dad tried out the brakes because he was worried I messed up my friend's bike, and the bike was fine and the brakes worked. Okay. I'm just going to say, I'm not denying it. I'm just saying that I didn't believe that, or I didn't know that. And so I've learned that you test and verify everything. And that's kind of what we talked about last week, Hun, in that Absolute Truth show, is that you want to test and verify everything.
That is the beauty of
against
science.
God's word.
That's why we continue to have science.
Yeah.
So, and sharing the stories. Okay. We don't want to continue with all these stories.
We could be here for days.
Right. So part of the deal here is Linda, you talked about earlier, Christ taught in parables, okay? And the parable is basically describing a life situation, but it has an outcome that the outcome should be teaching us a lesson, okay? And it also means that the parables are things that were culturally relatable that for the time. And so maybe, in today's time, I might go, well, why did they go to a well to get water or whatever? Why don't you just turn on a faucet? But they were speaking in the time, okay?
Yeah.
And so the important part here is when we have stories in life, there is what we see here on this earth as to what's going on.
The lower story.
Right, the lower story. And then there is, what is happening in the bigger picture, or the upper story, the big story, okay? And we were talking before we recorded, because if you don't have an understanding of God's working, and you only had the perspective of the here and the now,
the lower story,
you will be stuck in that story. And that is, and especially when bad things happen, that can be a bad place to be stuck.
Yeah.
All right. And so understanding that there is a bigger picture. All right. And that's, again, that is so important, hon. Remember the corn maze?
Yes.
You want to share with our poor kiddos the torture?
So years ago, we went to this corn maze that had a really cool, perch, a tower.
An outlook tower,
An outlook that you could, as a parent, go up and look at the whole corn maze and see the kids in it. And we took our two oldest, and the oldest one, man, he was running. He was flying, and he would hit dead ends. He'd turn around, he'd hit another dead end, and he was just trying to navigate it, right, without a lot of fear and just trusting that he's going to be okay. He's going to get out. But our second oldest, he was starting to panic.
Well, he was 3 years younger.
Yeah.
And he didn't think that this thing could end. Right, the older one had the knowledge that somehow he's gonna get out. We're going to get him. Okay, he can look up and see us in the tower, and he's not going to be up there or just wasting away. The younger one couldn't see that he could be, and I'll use the word, saved, and it started to panic him. And again, it brought on that anxiety and tears of what do I do now, especially after I start getting more confused. I've already tried this route, I did this, I did that, nothing seems to be working. It was very interesting from a parenting perspective to see the panic and anxiety.
Yeah.
Okay, and then all of a sudden starting to call out to him, right? And, hey,
right.
buddy, we're right here. Don't worry, we'll be right
Turn
down.
around, go this way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where God is. God has this 50,000-foot level view of our life and others' lives and how they're going to interact and how they're going to collide and how they're going to turn and twist. But we can't see that. Just like our second oldest son couldn't see a way out, while our older one trusted that he's going to be okay. And if worst came to worst, he had a parent that was watching over him that can guide him out. And that's where our relationship with God is that our lower story may be like in that corn maze where you can't see a way out, you can't see the dead ends ahead of you, and you keep hitting those walls. But there is a way out, and he does have a plan.
What an important lesson here. So, I think of why would somebody not look up to the person who had the bigger 50,000 view? Why would I not look up? So I go through a bad thing. My house burns down. I lose a job. I have a death of a child. I have a terrible thing. And listen, some people go, oh, well, God did that because no, God allows these kinds of things, just like He allowed you to walk into the corn maze.
Yeah.
I mean, He allows that free will, right? But what would keep me, especially after I feel lost or I'm getting hurt inside the corn maze, what would keep me from looking up for help?
Yeah.
And this is that whole thing of understanding what it was, the fall from God's grace in the Garden of Eden. One thing that keeps me from looking up would be ignorance. And in the case of our younger son, he was a little guy.
Right.
He did, and we actually had to say, "Hey,
buddy, we're right here."
Yeah, and so once he started to see us, and we got his attention, okay, then his ignorance was able to be put back in its proper place, and he could start to listen to us.
Yeah.
But there is another human condition that is very dangerous here. I'm lost. I'm banging myself around in this maze, and my pride.
I refuse.
My pride, my limitations. And so combining ignorance with pride and arrogance, all right, which that's ignorance and pride together is arrogance, right? And so those coming together keeps us stuck. And so when we have a tragedy, let's just say the house burns down, I still have a choice in that story. That story is a tragic story.
Yep.
All right, but I have a choice in that story, and I think you and I had to talk a little bit, hon, because that's bad things can happen to good people, and they're like, why?
Yep.
And we have to look up for the guidance. We have to rest in that God has this.
And trust that even in your lower story may look tragic or difficult or inconvenient, that there's something bigger and greater. For instance, I think of 9/11 and the people that went to work into the Twin Towers every day. But the day of 9/11, they had an inconvenience, or maybe a child was sick, or their car wouldn't start, or they missed the train. And now what they thought was an inconvenience, they see now in the upper story, it was God's provision of protection, and that they actually survived a horrible tragedy through what they thought was just in their lower story an inconvenience. And so we've got to trust that God has something good to come out of everything. And I think of Jeremiah 29:11, where God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, and plans to give you a hope and a future." And then in verse 12 it says, "Then if you call on me and come and pray to me, I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." So there's that who are you looking at kind of perspective.
Right, and seeking Him versus self or even other man-made entities. And so it's really important as we're going to walk through these stories. And what was the story of my bridge building? Well, we were all proud of ourselves.
Don't give up the ship.
Right, don't give up the ship. We were all proud of ourselves in that bridge building. And there was always something more to learn. There was always something that you had to go, you have a choice, and that one of them is to cry and shake your head and go, why did this happen? Or to get back at the work and be persistent in giving this to God and asking for help.
And hon, I think that is one of the greatest gifts your dad has given all of you kids, all 5, is that he never gave up, and that he continued to be I don't even know, ingenuity? No, creative. to find a way out of a problem and to not give up. And he had to sometimes humble himself, and he had to seek help. And so that's what God is asking us to do, to not give up, to not throw in the towel, to not blame him, but to trust him in the upper story that he's got going on, a good plan for your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we think about going in through challenges, we want you to think about the challenges that you've had in your life.
Yeah.
And, not to be cliche, but there's that there's a silver lining to every storm. Well, what are some of the silver linings that you've seen? Like, man, when this happened, it was the worst thing. I just actually was speaking with a friend of mine late last week, and he's still kind of in a storm, but he was in a terrible storm with job loss and this type of thing. And I just asked him, I said, dude, how are you holding up through all this? And he's like, I know it sounds weird, but so much of this has been a blessing.
Yeah.
And one is because it kicked his tail to the point where he was down on his knees in that maze and frustrated, angry, even angry at God, why? Because one morning I had it all, and the next morning it was just seemed to be taken away. Yeah. But through that refinement process, he has seen. One thing that he said that I think is so important through this job loss situation is, I have been able to spend so much time with my kids and my wife that I've never had before, and we're loving it.
Yeah.
That in itself might be the blessing or the silver lining that actually he needs to build from that now.
Yeah. And you said house burning down, and my grandmother, and I've told this story before, her house burned down and she had to move out, and it was after a attic fan had gone haywire, and it burned the attic specifically where all of her stuff was. And it was amazing to me that a woman in her late 80s at the time could look at that and say, you know what, I'm going to be okay, and God's got me. And that was a lesson for me. So it wasn't just for my grandma. I think that house burning down was a lesson for all of us in her life, where she was willing to trust God, even in what seemed to be such despair. She lost a daughter. She lost her license. All of these, she lost her husband. All of those things, she would say, God's got me. I'm trusting in him in my story.
Definitely would constantly be in the maze, but looking up to the overlooked tower.
Yes. And that was inspiration for me.
Yeah,
it really was.
And I think back of when our second oldest son tried to get into the Naval Academy, and man, he that in itself was a process. Not just trying to get into any college. It's just there's a heavy duty screening process, and just getting nominations.
We're really picking on him today. I hope he's listening. Yeah. We love you, buddy, and we are so proud of you.
But he didn't get in. He got rejected, and
he didn't get accepted. He was rejected.
He got rejected from the.
You weren't rejected, buddy.
Not by us, but by the Naval Academy. And what was harder was he applied again a second year, and in this second year, he was even told things like, "Man, you've got it all together. You've done everything you need to do." He was actually in an ROTC program at the time, and he was told by them that he should not have any problem. And
his older brother was in there, so it made it even tougher, thinking, I could do it.
Yeah. And he got turned down again.
Yeah.
And that one really hurt, because he got turned down more by somebody he thought was going to cover him more locally. And the moral of that story is, and he will tell you this now, he is so glad he didn't go to the Naval Academy, because he ended up flourishing at Miami University of Ohio, finding his wife there.
See, who also went to Miami, so there you go. Wouldn't have met her at the Naval Academy.
Yeah, and finding a group of friends that they are still best of friends. They moved from Miami, Ohio. Yes. Now they all live in Virginia Beach.
Well, they moved to California, then they moved to Virginia Beach. Yeah. They all kind of followed each other, which was so cool. And not to mention the fact that he got a full ride, and he was still able to pursue his dreams that he would have if he had gone to the Naval Academy. So the path was not stopped. It was changed a little bit, but now he can look back and see the upper story of what God was doing, even in double whammy kind of rejection in his mind.
Double whammy, is that a God word? I'm going to put the double whammy on you.
I remember tearing up with him and just being so heartbroken for him.
I remember being angry on his behalf, like he didn't get the fair
Got
treatment.
robbed,
It wasn't
yeah.
justifiable. And so, but again, we're all in the learning process of this as well. And so I think it's important that sometimes what you think you see is the right thing or even the wrong thing. It may be not always be as it appears, just as the parables that Christ used. It doesn't always quite appear or turns out as it appeared. So anyway, we're going to have a good time talking these stories. I want you to think about your own stories. I want you to think about, wow, I was dreading this particular thing in my life, and now I am so thankful that it actually happened. It altered the course of my life. I want you to be thinking about those stories, those opportunities, because those are the things that actually then create that solidness in you that remind you, oh no, I don't need to panic. I've seen this play out before in a different scenario.
Yeah. And you may not be able to see God's upper story. And we ask that you would just reach out to him. He is up in that tower. He is looking over the entire situation. And James 1:5 tells us, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, and he gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So we're just asking for you to just really reflect on maybe a story in your life and where you can see maybe God's hand or upper story in that. And we're going to continue this series, Hun, of stories that Jesus tells and the meanings and the lessons that we can learn today, because it says God's word is alive and active, and it is still able to be used to teach us a lesson.
Good stuff. All right. So think about your stories. Your story might still be in the process. You might be on chapter 1 right now of your story. But we all have stories that are either finished or just starting. And so none of these are completed for life right now. And that's the cool thing, too, of realizing, well, what story are you writing right now?
Yeah.
We like to talk about those kinds of things. So we'd like to thank Maxwell Construction and Casey Outdoor Solutions for being proud sponsors of the Rock Solid Radio program. Again, if you are struggling in your walk of life, whether it's your marriage, your family, even something with work-related, your faith, reach out to us at Rock Solid Families. That's 812-576-7625. This is what we do for a living. We get our hands right in the middle of what these challenges are in life. And, we enjoy it because we like to watch, not us work, we like to watch God work.
God's
and there
upper
is
story.
nothing more amazing than to watch God alter a life, change somebody from addiction to sobriety, from divorce papers to let's renew our vows, from kids who are getting ready to get kicked out of school to kids who are finding themselves on the honor roll list. I mean, these are the types of things that you can see when you take a deep breath and let God start to work on your heart. So come see us at Rock Solid Families. Let us help you out.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Man, we got some stories that we could have told. I'm not going to tell those stories.
No, be careful.
Those are our BC stories.
Shh. Before Christ.
Yeah, I'm going to let it go right there.
Yeah. Shh.
Say ya.
Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Maxwell Construction, who has been our sponsor since the very beginning. For over 30 years, Maxwell has delivered the highest quality projects by holding to their core values of customer satisfaction, positive attitude, respect, and excellence. So if you have any kind of commercial construction need, give Maxwell Construction a call today at 812-537-2200.